Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host. We're sponsored by Cosgrove Content, your wordsmiths for industry. If you have trouble finding folks who can write about the technical nature of the job that you do, look us up. We can help you out there, cosgrovecontent.com. And I'm very pleased today to welcome Dan Burgos. He is the CEO and president of Alphanova Consulting. So they do consulting services for the manufacturing industry, and we'll dig into that here in a minute. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being on. I appreciate it. And in advance, a Merry Christmas to you.
Oh, you too. You too. Thanks so much.
Yeah, coming on fast, isn't it?
It is. This year, it seems like it's flown. It's crazy that 2020, it's almost 3 years behind us.
Crazy. Yeah. Crazy times. So again, appreciate you being on. And, as we get into this, first thing I want to know is just about you. Tell us about yourself, your background, how you got into doing what it is you do.
Sure. And first of all, thanks for having me as well. So to start, I'm originally from the Dominican Republic. You probably hear the accent. Spanish is my native language. And just fast forward through life, basically, when I first was starting to decide my profession, believe it or not, I wanted to be a lawyer. And that's the path I wanted, solving problems, being inquisitive. And when I learned you had to take a bar exam for every state you moved to, I said, okay, that's not for me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I landed on industrial engineering. And that's what's taking me into manufacturing. I have a passion for improving, solving problems, that kind of thing. And when I was first exposed to manufacturing when I was in college, I just fell in love. I just remember the hair on my back standing up and say, wow, this is fun. But the other part that over time I recognized that was fun was just collaborating with people and really making a difference, driving improvements. So I completed my undergrad degree in Puerto Rico. That's where I went to college. And eventually I moved to Texas, which is my home base. And at one point I transitioned from working for an airline and finally found a home in manufacturing. And what I did over my career, I was very quickly introduced to continuous improvement, operations management, and again fell in love with it. I said, okay, this is all amazing things. You can do amazing things with this. Yeah. And in my first impression, at my first company, my first employer, I got exposed to consultants, and that's when I said, okay, I think that may be what I want to do, because my entrepreneurial mindset goes back from when I was like 9 years old. My dad just instilled that in me. And then over time, I had different roles in different manufacturing companies, knowing that consulting was going to be the destination. And back in 2016 is when I felt I was ready to take that leap and jump head first into the journey. And we've been in business since 2016, working with manufacturing companies.
Nice. It's interesting. We share a couple things in common. Engineering. So I have a mechanical engineering degree. And similar to you, is in college where I first started falling in love with manufacturing. I had a class, I think it was senior year, it was called Energy Systems, which doesn't tell you a bunch by its name, right? But it was all about like sizing pumps and calculating flow rates, just all the stuff that you do in the process industry. And I was just in hog heaven with that class. Loved it.
No, it's great. I think manufacturing, it's fascinating. It's so complex, and there's so much to see. It's just amazing. I enjoy just visiting manufacturers.
Yeah, cool. And so interesting that you had that consulting kind of bug from early on, and you worked your way to it. So now tell us about that transition, how you got going with Alphanova, and just the progress through the past 6 years as you built it up?
Yeah, so I can go back as far as early 2000s that I discovered consulting and I was taking workshops and things like that. So I didn't have my arms wrapped around it. But as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that company that I was exposed to gave me more clarity. But the other thing was I was working with this company and they sent us to some training, and the person facilitating the training was a consultant, and I got curious, and I'll admit I'll be a little vulnerable here. When I first came to the U.S., being an immigrant, English being my second language, that was very intimidating,
Oh, I
and
bet.
I questioned, can I even do this? Little old me is gonna come to powerful U.S. and make a difference, do something. Um, and then when I met this consultant, I got curious and I started asking questions. How did you do it? Did you do it by yourself? And he just gave me, and I'm grateful to him to this day. When I talk to him, it's a pleasure, and I express my gratitude. But he gave me the confidence, helped me see that the backbone of the U.S. economy is small businesses, and
Right.
that's where you start. And I remember it was June of 2009 that I said, okay, I'm committing. I'm making a contract with myself. I am going to do this. And from that day on, I basically directed my career to be exposed to as many different manufacturing industries as possible, to learn as much as I could, to practice as much as I could. And when the time came, sometimes these things happen and you don't plan it. Like I was thinking, maybe in 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, I'll start my company,
Hmm.
and then I got laid off.
Oh,
And I
yep.
said, okay, am I going to go apply for a job I don't want, or am I gonna, you know, get my courage? And that's when I decided. I said, okay, I'm going. Let's do this. And I started 2016. My inspiration, Alphanova, means new beginning, because my passion is to really make such a difference that people feel like, wow, these folks came and it was just like a new beginning. That was the inspiration for the name. Of course, every engagement doesn't lend itself for that type of scenario, but that was the inspiration.
Yep.
And the main thing I'll say is, from my experience, we learned that it's two things that really make a difference. It's having the right processes, but also having the right behaviors, and specifically
Mhm.
leadership behaviors that drive really the heart of the culture of a company. And
Yep.
so, with that philosophy in mind, that's what we strive to affect with every client engagement.
Yep. Excellent. Um, I love that story, by the way, about you coming over from um, Dominican Republic and
Dominican,
Puerto
oh yeah,
Rico. And
that was
yeah,
that was scary. I mean, I can. Someday I will post this on social, but I remember being, where I lived. Um, we lived just, I mean, literally, like just a couple streets off the shore. Like reef was there, like the coastline was there, and I
hmm,
remember just staring at the horizon and thinking, I will be somebody someday. I will do something. And then when I came here to Dallas, there's a tower that's called Reunion Tower, and it's very famous up here. And you just sit there. I remember going with some friends within like a month of me moving here. And when I got my first manufacturing job, we went up there around that time. And I remember just staring. You could see the whole city. And I said, okay, you're here. What are you going to do now? And just having those flashbacks, it's just amazing.
that's fabulous. And so, congratulations. You are somebody. You're a small business owner, and yeah, I mean, to me, that's just the American dream. Someone coming over and making that opportunity for themselves. So, well done.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm guilty of not recognizing my own accomplishments. My wife has to
Yeah.
remind me all the time. Like I don't feel I've made it or I've made any significant accomplishments. But it's when you look back at your trajectory, at our own trajectory, it's really revealing for sure.
Yeah, definitely worth the time to, don't get don't get the big head because, as you
No.
know, we can all get knocked down again anytime. But it's important
Oh
to
yeah.
acknowledge how far you've come.
No question about it. I that's one area I need to focus on, and it just appreciate things for what they are.
Yep, definitely. Okay, so you've got Alphanova going 2016. Tell me, how did you um, decide what to focus on as a company? I've been on your website. I know some of the areas that you kind of drive to help companies in their transformations. How did you get to those particular applications as the focus for Alphanova Consulting?
Okay, so part of it, it was a mixture of my education and also my experience. So, of course, my background is industrial engineering. So as soon as I started working, it felt like a kid with toys. Let's move the machines and improve the
Yeah.
flow and have fun with all this stuff. That was natural. But when I started doing that, what I recognized was that having an influence, having if people don't buy in, the leaders are gonna actually execute this day in, day out, you're gonna have a hard time being successful.
Yep.
And over time, I mean, Jim, I work with companies and I honestly saw the dirty side, or not the dirty, the ugly side of culture. I was in a company that it was so stressful, the environment, and so cutthroat that it flared up a heart condition that I had. And I ended up a handful of times in the ER, and I ended up having to get heart surgery.
Wow.
And that just cut me deep to the point that I said, there's got to be a better way. You got to find a way to change the culture. I remember just the pressure I put on myself because I wanted to be successful. It got me to where my health was being affected,
Yeah.
and through that and seeing the effect, living through it, and then also being exposed to seeing when both things come together, the
Mm-hmm.
processes, but also the behaviors, the leadership behaviors specifically, I can see the results. Um, Quite honestly, I'll give you a recent example. Was working with this client and we just finished this project. We're just wrapping it up. 3/4 of the way, we implemented the main things, and the results were marginally better. And it came to the point where we had to decide we had to make a change. We had to make a change on leadership,
Mm-hmm.
and we made the change. And within weeks, the results just incredible. When you have the combination of the right leaders with the right behaviors and the right processes, that's
Right.
where the magic happens. And so through those experiences, of course, that personal experience was very strong, made a very strong impression in me, led me to think or led me to develop our approach, of course, that focuses on developing the right processes, but also ensuring you have the right leaders so that you have the right culture. And then when it comes to execution, you have a competitive advantage.
Yep. Yep. So we share something else in common there. I was thinking of as you talked. I also had a couple different experiences of working in companies where there were some really bad behaviors by top leaders, and fortunately, I didn't get as hammered by it as you did. I didn't have to have surgery, but I had some health effects and some real depression over it. And you're right. There's plenty of things worse, but that is really bad to be working in an environment where people aren't behaving right and aren't exhibiting the correct behaviors, and it just drags the whole organization down. It's unfortunate.
It is, and sometimes leaders, manufacturing leaders, probably your listeners are drawn to higher profits, shorter lead times, better quality, and all that. And sometimes it becomes hard to quantify really the effects of having those environments and having poor leaders. So I've actually I feel like I'm on a quest to bottle that and really prove that out. Um, because we feel while it's not measurable or tangible, I feel it's probably as much, if not more, impactful to the performance, to the results of a business.
Yeah, I love that. I've taken to saying a lot here lately how uh, a, a big part of manufacturing going astray has been this total focus on what's transactional, right? The total focus on dollars and cents, and shaving things regardless of the impact. And I couldn't agree more. That cultural side that's been so neglected for so long because people couldn't put dollars and cents next to it on the P&L, it didn't count. And we're learning, yeah, it does count.
Yeah, no question about it. No
Yeah.
question.
Good. That's excellent. Okay. So, as you work with the company, tell me some things that you look at as far as the indicators. Obviously, there's KPIs that are, I'm sure, pretty consistent from company to company, but I would also think that each situation is unique in its own way. So give me a little insight into how you go in, first working with a company and assessing what's needed and how you move forward.
Yeah, and before I dive in, I meant to mention, I'll if you could share a link. I have a link for a self-assessment for manufacturing companies. They answer basically 10 questions and they get, some benchmarks and some feedback as to where they are, which could be you're doing amazing, keep maintain the course, or there's a significant opportunities, and I'll give us some feedback. So if you could please share that with your listeners, that would be great.
Yep, I can plug that in right here, and I'll also include it in the posts on social when this goes live.
Good, thank you. So to answer your question, some of the things that we look at, so there's four main areas that we focus on. To sum it up, or four categories. So number one is operational, of course. Some of the things we look at, operational performance, right? Things like safety, quality, delivery, and cost. And those have their own measures, right? Are we delivering on time? Is the quality correct? Equipment effectiveness, overtime, labor costs, things like that, in safety incidents, those kinds of things. Then we get into the strategy deployment process. And some of these are not going to be as tangible, but I'll tell you a little bit about what we look for. On the strategy, we look at, all right, do they have a strategic plan for the next 12 months, for the next 3 to 5 years? Do they have goals that they're pursuing? And how is that deployed and cascaded from the executives all the way down to the shop floor people? And how are they performing? Are they being completed? Is it a structured approach where they have recurring reviews and they have metrics for the entire business that focuses on short-term goals, but also long-term goals, so that the outlook it's balanced. So we look for those things. The next one would be on the people side, on the leaders, and we look at both things, leadership and management. On the management side, it's more of the operational things you would see. Are they good problem solvers? Do they look at metrics? Are they good at accountability or process management, which is one term we kind of coined, whereas enforcing protocols and processes. And then on the leadership side, some of the things we look at are, how good are they at developing their people? How good are they at retaining people? Those can bring some of the tangible or measurable metrics, such as turnover. But I'll give you a little more. What percentage of the people are internal promotions? What's the tenure? Maybe looking at some of the exit interviews and see what are the comments. We start digging into those things. We do some surveys as well to understand the culture. Let's see. We do some surveys to understand the cohesiveness of the leadership team, because we see the leadership team, or the senior leadership team, as almost like the parents. If you look at this from a family dynamic, if there's disarray at the top, you can't help but have the same, throughout the following or the lower layers. And so we look for that cohesiveness. Are they high levels of trust? Are they good at having conflict? And are they engaging? And I'll give you a little bit more on culture, which is the last one. Okay. I feel culture is it's a fuzzy thing, hard to measure. So I'll give you the analogy I give people. So how would you feel if you go to a company that values an attribute and that's something you have absolutely nothing of. If you walk in and you see that the expectations are clear, the reward systems are very clear, rewarding those attributes, and you don't have them, it's almost like it's going to sting you, and you're going to say, I either shape up or I don't fit. And so we help companies understand and leverage the power of developing what we call a culture identity. So that culture needs to come through so strong that when people set foot for the interview, for when you're actually screening them, that it's going to repel them if they're the wrong fit, and it's just going to pull them in if it's the right fit. And it's developed throughout your human systems, where when you're screening, when you're interviewing, when you're onboarding, and that what's the word I'm looking for? That 90-day period, that what's the word? I'm forgetting the word. That temporary period where you're having that trial time. And so we help those companies, because a lot of companies don't leverage their values, their priorities, their purpose, all of those things. So we help them leverage that to be able to create that work environment where the overlap on the cultural values is so strong that people that don't fit are naturally going to say, I don't feel good here. And that's not a good or bad thing. It's just, we all have to find a place where we can fit and we can contribute. We can go home, fulfilled with the work that we do every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Probationary period. That's what you're looking for.
Probationary period. Thank you.
And so you're shooting to kind of make it clear on both sides whether it's a fit as someone comes in for the first few months. Yeah,
100%,
interesting.
100%.
Good. And so now let's talk about, you're engaged with the company. You've gone through all those assessments, and I know you employ lean tools and some other aspects of improvement. What is it in your experience? You hear these stories all the time of how many of these kinds of efforts just fail. What is it that drives those failures, and how do you avoid that?
Yeah, as you probably see, there's a theme to this, right? And we actually have an article up on the website. It's called 10 Reasons Why Lean Manufacturing Implementations Fail. So I encourage listeners to go check that out. But basically, if you look at it, as I mentioned earlier, to us, the formula is ideal behaviors combined with ideal processes give you the ideal results. So I'll break that down for you. Processes are the easy part, right? Machines don't talk back to us. Machines don't have feelings or bad days or get sick. You could argue they get sick because they break down, right? But other than that, machines are the easy part. We call it like moving the furniture, right? To get flow and balance the line, all those things. But it's when you get into the behaviors, right? Keeping people engaged and displaying and being consistent and having those behaviors, that's where the challenge lies. So the majority of the time, what it fails is because it's not because people don't have the skills to really apply the improvements. It's more because people can find the alignment to actually function cohesively in displaying those behaviors. Just to give you some examples, some people have what we call, the hero syndrome, or the addiction to heroic recovery, where they feel their job is to watch production, and whenever it breaks down, it's my job to intervene, fix the problem, and then let it go, as opposed to being proactive and measuring things and giving people participation and improving the work environment. And so when those two schools of thoughts clash, that's where the breakdown happens. And that just perpetuates over and it happens at all levels. It could be strategic, it could be tactical. And so when you don't have leadership support, and I'm talking about senior leadership support, when you have the senior leader of the business committed 100%, and I always tell this to them, I need you to be so committed that if we have someone that's worked with you shoulder to shoulder for 20 years, that you have a high level of respect and they can't come on or they're going to be a blocker, we have to be able to get past that. That's the level of commitment we need. And you have to rally everyone else around that to raise their level of commitment as well. So that's where the challenge lies. And it's all on the leadership, it's all on the behavior side. Once you have that, it's much easier. And it's not much easier because the obstacles are going to get easier. It's just you're going to have the ability to overcome them, as opposed to just fall into this ongoing struggle to really overcome those. And that's where they.
Interesting. Yeah. Another thing you typically hear is that, and you just kind of alluded to it, is that need for senior leadership to be bought in, to be involved in the transformation. What do you see as far as, the specifics of that need? And then let me as a follow-up question to that, flip it on its head and say, what are you looking for out of the frontline workers then?
So from the leader, I'm looking for that level of commitment. And then the other one's a big one, which actually happens to be one of our core values, courage. Jim, it takes courage to tell people that, they either need to come aboard or they're going to have to find a different role or possibly a different company to work for. That takes courage. I can't tell you how many times people tolerate a competent person that has a character that's just not a good fit. Sounds from your face expression, I'm guessing you've probably seen that a time or two. And if you're really going to build a high level execution business, you have to work on those folks and you have to bring everybody on board. And that takes courage. Change agents are not going to get results by being nice and by making everybody happy. It's by doing the right things and get everybody on board. That's how change happens. Mm-hmm. And to answer your second question around what do I expect from the front line? That's an interesting question. Openness to learning. A lot of times we go to these companies, and if you doesn't cease me to surprise me that when you ask how much training have you received when it comes to leadership, and the answer typically is none. But yet we throw them into these leadership roles a lot of times because they have a high level of technical ability, which is one of the reasons to do that, because handling people and just motivating people, matching them up with the right role, counseling them, holding them accountable, enforcing processes and protocols have nothing to do with technical ability. And so what I look for is openness to learn, being coachable, being a good listener, because that's what we're going to help them. We're going to help them develop the right leadership mindset. We're going to teach them, how to hold people accountable, how to coach someone, and coaching not in the sense of telling them what to do, but more like helping them go through that self-discovery process where you guide them, and when they see it for themselves, it just hits them like a brick upside the head and said, "Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense," as opposed to me pointing out the way. So I guess those are the two things: being coachable and openness to learning. And if those two things are there, just the sky's the limit. And I've seen it a number of times. When we have those two things, people just make a remarkable difference.
Now, let me ask you this. I think people go into this thinking you're just going to apply these tools and these principles and things are just going to happen and get fixed right away. And that's not typically the way it works, right? So how do you coach people through those inevitable setbacks and get that grit and determination that you need to really see things through?
Yeah, I'll tell a little short story. I was talking once with a prospect, and he point blank asked me, "Is this something you come over a weekend, smack us over the head, and now we're lean?" And I said, "No, that's definitely not the way it's going to happen." And here's how I kind of calibrate those expectations. I tell them, "Look, I want you to think that this is not a program or a project. This is a management system that we're going to embed into your company, and it just becomes the new way you function.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the most difficult things to accomplish is change behavior. For you to change behavior, you got to change your mindset, and this could turn into a psychological black hole that I don't want to get into, but you have to get into the minds of people and really change their mindset at the core of what their beliefs are.
Yeah.
And that takes time. That takes numerous interactions of teaching them things they don't know, but also getting them to see things from a different perspective. You know, there's this concept out there that's called emotional intelligence that we really drive with leaders. If your self-awareness is low, you're potentially a bull in a china shop. You're wreaking havoc out there, and you have no idea that people just have this perception of you that, you know, you're rude, you're inconsiderate, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And to untangle those wires and re-put them in the right place so those people humble themselves and really get on board with, you know, I'm not perfect and I need to learn, and I'm going to admit my mistakes. I'm going to learn new tools from you, and I'm going to get on this growth journey as an organization. That takes so much work, so much effort, so much openness, so much vulnerability that it's work. And so with that foundation set, then we have to get into, okay, where's the performance of your business today? How receptive are your folks? How complex is your organization? And now we get on that journey to start making those changes. And it's not a linear change, because sometimes we get ahead on changing the process, but then we get people that are resisting, and we have to enforce that. And so it's a dance where we're trying to move both these needles, and it's unpredictable how people will react and how fast we're able to get results. And typically on the short side of the timeline, I tell them 18 months. And then on the other side of the spectrum, it's open-ended. We've worked with clients for several years to really complete that transformation.
Yep.
Hopefully that gives listeners a sense of what's entailed and how long to expect.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I have experienced the same thing as you, of people who have these ridiculous ideas that it's just going to be turning the switch and things are going to change overnight, and it's not going to happen that way. I've never seen it happen in less than, you know, what you said, kind of on the short end is that 18-month period. But yeah, a few years is not at all unusual, right?
That's exactly right, especially when you know, when you're talking about changing the mindset of a group of people.
Yeah,
And
and the work never stops too. That's the other thing people need to wrap their minds around.
that's exactly right. And one thing to consider is, and I think some of your listeners will connect with this, you know, some of these folks have been, you know, let me take a step back. One of my mentors very early told me the executives usually get it from the get-go. You're going to help me improve my on-time delivery. You're going to help me make more money. I'm in.
Yeah.
But it's when you go in with the middle managers that they've been doing this for 20 years and they've ascended, you know, they've built a career doing things this way, and you're going to come in, you don't know anything about our industry, you're going to tell me that I have to do things differently. That can be shocking to someone, and that's actually where the biggest challenge is. But as long as you have that support from the top leader and that person starts to open up, that's when the magic happens.
Yep. Good. Let's shift gears and talk about your company a little more. So, obviously off to a great start here, 6 years in. What are you looking at for the future? What are kind of your benchmarks of success and where you want to take things?
Yeah, so for us, it's growth right now. We want to continue to expand. We're building a footprint here in our area, and we want to continue to expand. We have a small team, and you know, we have our sights our sights set on growth. I want to say that we have a mission to work with thousands by the time we're through of mid-market manufacturers and just change that culture, change the results. I want to our purpose is to help U.S. manufacturing thrive. So that's a mammoth of a purpose of a goal,
Yep.
and we want to grow enough to make a difference in the manufacturing sector. That's our goal.
Yep. Good. Then my last question to you is there anything in the current state of manufacturing? Obviously, there's a lot of craziness with supply chain and with recruiting and all of that. Anything that you see where people should be thinking about things any differently or prioritizing any differently when it comes to turning things around for themselves?
Yeah, this is gonna sound maybe out of the blue, but I was doing some research here recently, and I just came across this piece of information that said that um, between now and 2030, the workforce for manufacturers is going to grow by 0.31%. That's a fraction of a percent. So all this reshoring, all this growth, there's going to be a lot of competition for all these jobs. And
Mm-hmm.
what that tells me is that there's going to be a lot of jobs unfilled. And so that's going to put a challenge in front of manufacturers. And so this is where people are going to have to think outside the box in terms
Mm-hmm.
of hiring practices, hiring right, but also developing their current workforce,
Right.
which
Right.
is an untapped opportunity for the most part. And it's going to require a lot of creativity from people to, you know, if you set foot on a manufacturing floor here in the U.S., there's a lot of English as a second language type of
Sure.
workers
Yeah.
that if manufacturers open their mind to helping these workers maybe acquire certain skills,
Mm-hmm.
their market is right there. Their bank of workers for those higher level positions could be in their backyard, and they
Yep.
don't see it. And so that's
Yeah.
a mindset that it just hit me here recently that I said people in manufacturing need to start really getting behind this because this workforce shortage crisis, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it only reinforces what you talked about earlier around getting your culture right, because that competition for pulling people in and keeping people is only going to get that much tougher.
And then one a small addition is also um part of implementing or adopting lean is right, you become more efficient, and
Yeah.
so the reliance or the need for a large workforce comes down. Now I will say that with a caveat. I don't subscribe to the school of thought of we need to reduce our workforce or cut the fat or whatever mindset. It's more
Mm-hmm.
about right sizing your operation and
Yep.
removing what's not necessary, and that'll give you relief when it comes to the need for labor, but not to be used maliciously to just cut jobs and just
Right.
do the things that when things fall into bad hands
Yep. Yep.
or in the wrong
Yeah,
hands,
I
I should
agree.
say.
Chopping heads for the sake of chopping heads is not going to improve your ability to attract a
No,
talented
exactly.
workforce.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Well, good. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to put out there we need to talk about?
I mean, I think we talked extensively about culture, which I really
Yeah.
appreciate. It's one of our passions. I would say, I guess, if people want to check us out, visit us at alphanovaconsulting.com. I encourage you respectfully to take that self-assessment. It's always good to look at what areas can we improve, what benchmarks should we be striving for, and yeah, and if we can be of help, feel free to reach out.
Yep. And we will have that link for the self-assessment on my manufacturing talks page on LinkedIn, as well as on my personal post when this thing goes live. And wrapping up here, I will point out this is our last show of 2022. So thanks to all those of you out there who've tuned in regularly and look for us coming in the new year on that first Tuesday after we get through all the festivities of Christmas and New Year's. And Dan, thanks so much for joining us. It was a very illuminating discussion. I wish you well with Alphanova Consulting.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation, and wish you and your listeners Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
Yep, thank you. Same to you. So long, folks.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Watch for new episodes dropping on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.